Hi, Erin. Welcome to Share Narratives.
Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. We have a lot of ground to cover, but I want to start way back at the beginning because I think you have a really interesting personal story. I read that you graduated from college when you were 18 and then graduated from law school when you were 21. I feel like it takes a minute for that to process with people, but tell us, like, what were you like as a kid and how did you end up on that path?
Yeah, I was always a nerd growing up as a kid. I loved school, like genuinely really loved it. And I never intended on going down that path. It was back, I guess, dates back to 2012. At the time, there was the massive Casey Anthony murder trial that was happening in Orlando, Florida, a mom accused of killing her daughter. And I wanted to know what it was like to be a lawyer. I was 13 years old at the time, and no one in my family had graduated college, let alone went to law school. So my dad kind of just sat me in front of the TV and was like, hey, this is what a lawyer does. Just watch this. And I kind of fell in love with it as a 13-year-old kid. Watched 32 days start to finish that summer. Didn't really leave the house. Probably wasn't the most healthy thing for a 13-year-old to do over the summer, but really fell in love with it and knew in that moment that I wanted to go to law school and kind of get there as quickly as possible. And in Boca Raton, Florida, where I grew up, there's a program through Florida Atlantic University, which is a state school, and there's an adjoining high school called Florida Atlantic University High School, where you take college classes instead of high school classes. So your typical English 101 in high school would just be your college English class, and you would take college classes with college students on the college campus, and it would count for both high school and college credits. So I ended up doing that for 4 years and graduated with my BA when I was 18, or technically before I graduated high school when I was 18, which was pretty awesome.
Oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. Do you feel like you had sort of the fun experience and the fun aspects of growing up and, going through school, or were you so focused on getting the credential and just sort of finishing that you were kind of serious all the way through?
So I had a lot of fun. I mean, so there were about 120 kids that all did it with me. Not
Hmm.
everyone, only about 10 of us graduated with our BA upon graduating high school, but the majority of them got an associate's degree. Um, we had a prom, we went to parties, I was the captain of my tennis team, did a lot of sports, and also I was part of college clubs as well. So definitely had a really fun time. I mean, I made some of my best friends I'm still friends with since high school. So it was very kind of traditional in that sense. And then I theoretically had more college experience when I was in law school, because
Hmm.
when I was in law school, yeah, I had friends in law school and would hang out with them, but I also would have friends in the undergrad at GW and would hang out with them. So got that experience as well.
So interesting. I want to talk about politics because that's your kind of core arena, the topic that you report on. Obviously, things are very weird and crazy, and I can say very different from how I grew up in politics. But I'm curious if someone woke up from, let's say, like a 30-year nap. Like, how would you describe U.S. politics to them today? What would you tell them?
It's normal. That's how I would tell them that we are living in a new normal. And the reason I call it normal is because everyone tells us 30 years ago that politics was you would debate on the House floor and then you'd get drinks afterwards. You'd have find common ground with your friends, families, whatever, who are Republicans if you're a Democrat, and vice versa. Well, the normal that I know as someone who has been in politics for not 30 years, for really just 8 years since the first political election I remember was back in 2016. I don't remember pre 2016. People my age don't remember Bush or Obama. So to us, this is normal what we're living through. We're living through chaos, we're living through dysfunction, but through all that chaos and dysfunction, this is our normal. So that's the best way I would describe it to someone, is that we're living in a new normal of what politics will be like moving forward. It's not going to be like the political system you grew up in 30 years ago. Not you, but to the person I'm talking about 30 years ago. We're living in a very different and new normal.
I think that makes sense. One question I want to ask you is like about political reporting specifically. Do you think it influences power in Washington, or do you think it's mostly just reactive?
Influencing power in Washington. I think it's both. I think it's both. I think there's definitely a reactive aspect to it where you're constantly reacting to the. I think in this day and age, in 2025, it is definitely more reactive because you're reacting to what's happening on Capitol Hill. You're reacting, especially to what the president is saying or doing. on Truth Social. Like you are, it's a very reactive system. But I do think at the same time it does influence power because there's still an aspect of journalism right now in that it in building those relationships where members want certain journalists to write about certain pieces. You're still pitching folks. You're still trying to get into papers and on TV. So there's still an aspect of it, but it's definitely more reactive in this day and age, I think, than it was any time in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of doom and gloom and just sort of like negativity out there. I'm curious if there are any either institutions or political figures that you've covered or written about that have surprised you in a positive way, that you've said, okay, the perception or the stereotype or the notion of them is different than I thought it was, or sure my peers thought it was.
I wouldn't necessarily say anything super different. I really think any, like, for example, Senator Cory Booker, it's not like he has a negative notion publicly. He has a general positive notion publicly. But I think when I was able to, I met with him the first time ever was back in February during a Vote-a-Rama session in the Senate. And he decided to take 30 minutes out of his time at 2 in the morning and give me a tour of the Capitol Dome and just like point out like things that like the general public just don't know about. And it was in that moment I was like, wow, oh my God, like he is a senator. He did not have to do this. I'm just a reporter. I'm a content creator. Like he went out of his way while votes are happening to show me something that no one else gets to see typically. And I think that was an example of just like politicians are human, right? Like they're humans too. And so I think that's the best example I can give right now.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and I've written about this on my Substack a little bit, is like, I think that a lot of the challenges with Washington is it's all just so shrouded in secrecy and everything's behind closed doors and people just don't even know what it looks like. Like maybe they watch C-SPAN, maybe they don't even have a subscription to it. But I think like giving people that kind of like front row view, whether it's just like a 5 minute view of the Capitol or inside a member's office or, you know, whatever it may be, people are just like hungry and desperate for that type of view into like how it works, what it looks like, what do people actually do all day, and like, could that happen at scale? I guess said differently. Like, could Cory Booker do that tour at scale? Would it be meaningful? Would people care? Would they watch it? I'm not like asking in a literal sense, but I
Yeah.
think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't think he needs to. I mean,
Mm,
I think people like members of Congress and people running for office ask me all the time. They're like, "How do I become big on social media?" And the number one thing I tell them is be yourself and show them something that they don't already know. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a capital tour at scale, but rather, if people running for office were more comfortable getting in front of a camera and just showing the generic day in the life, showing them what call time's like, showing them what it's like to run for office, and then if you're a
yep.
member, show us like what's behind the scenes. Like I guarantee you 99% of the public do not know that all the committee hearings don't actually happen in the place where they vote. It happens in like the House offices and the Senate, like the Senate office buildings. It doesn't actually happen in the Capitol even. And people just don't even know like little things like that. So I think the more people can get the behind the scenes at scale, the better.
Totally. I have the funniest little anecdote. Do you remember when Mark Warner posted that video of him making a tuna fish sandwich like a few years ago? And people were so horrified. I think just because he used a lot of mayonnaise, no shade to him by any means. But that type of like human moment, which is like, who is this guy? What does he like? What does his kitchen look like? It sounds so simple and basic, but I think giving people a little bit of that access in a safe way is really, really important. And I just don't see it that much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the reasons why AOC is the figure that she is because she gives that behind the scenes. Like she'll go live cooking late at night. She, in her campaign ads, was literally washing her face, getting ready in the morning in her bathroom in New York City, right? Like people don't get that type of access. And when they do, they really like it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Who do you think are, I hate to use the word up and coming, but like who do you think are like the up and coming politicians to watch from either party, um, that are just doing it right, whether they're being open and transparent and vulnerable, or they have fresh ideas, or they're campaigning in new ways? Obviously, a lot of people are talking about Mom Donnie, but you know, curious who you think are kind of the people folks should watch right now.
Yeah, I mean, Mom Donnie is definitely like one of the big figures that everyone's talking about, but I'm going to throw out some names that people aren't really talking about. Pat Ryan in the House in New York, really doing it right, really kind of um, consensus builder, but also a progressive kind of fighter. So he's someone that I've been watching very closely, and I think um, just like knows what he's doing. I also really like MGP, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily politically always, her and I don't always agree, but I just think she is the best example of like what a member of Congress should be. She doesn't necessarily vote the way her party always wants, right? She sticks to her guns, she sticks to her district, and she wins in a district she probably shouldn't be winning as a Democrat. So like that, those two are kind of like examples where I'm just like, yeah, they're up and comers in the party. They may never be Speaker of the House or make national news every single day, but that's not necessarily, I think, what they're there for.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the acronym MGP, so apologies if that's what she goes by now, but I'll use that because it's easier.
It's what,
Um,
what they call her online, like the instead of MTG, the left is the it's MGP.
okay, I'm obviously a little out of it, but she is really, really interesting. She did an interview with the New York Times maybe a couple months ago, where even just the way that she spoke and articulated her thoughts was so unique. I almost had to close my eyes and I was like, is she a writer? Like she was like almost sort of like editorializing her thoughts in a really interesting way, which you don't usually see. It's usually much more dry and kind of sterile. And yeah, I think she's super interesting as
Yeah,
well.
it's fascinating. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask you, you broke this story today, which I want to hear about in your own words. I did skim it. I didn't have time to read the full thing, but I want to hear the story.
Yeah.
I'm curious as you do reporting that you're doing, like, is there anything you come across that you couldn't publish that you wanted to?
Yeah.
And do you get worried about the legalities of what you're doing, or the lines not to cross because you're a lawyer yourself?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So there was definitely at the beginning of the second Trump administration, during the first week or two, when agencies, including intelligence agencies, were issuing memos left and right about changes that are going to be happening within the agency. I received a number of tips from folks in the federal government. I still do, but a lot more at the beginning because there was just so much more content coming out. And there were times when I saw a memo come across my inbox, and it may not have been classified. I mean, I honestly don't even know. I don't think it was classified at the time, but it was still coming from an agency that I'm just like, I don't know if I can fully publish this right now. I might
Hmm.
have to do vetting. I might have to just A, make sure that it's fully accurate, and B, make sure that if I do publish it, I don't get pushback for it. In those situations, I have just waited, and then like in that situation, like 3 hours later, NBC News published the memo, and it was a memo from the DIA concerning like them not no longer observing Holocaust Remembrance Day. And that came out earlier this year, and that was a memo that I was just like, I don't know if I can publish this, and I don't have a full legal staff behind me that if I do publish this and they come after me, I can win. So I waited there. So it does happen every now and then, but it's rare.
Hmm. I've heard some other Substack writers talk about this of like whether Substack itself should offer legal services or, what type of sort of liabilities that Substack writers have when they go out and say something on their own platform. Um, would you
Yeah.
ever hire a team of lawyers or you would
So
kind of just like outsource piecemeal?
I
Yeah.
have since hired counsel,
Okay.
so I do have counsel now, but it's not like New York Times counsel in the sense of like I can go to them every single minute of every single day and get like legal advice. A, that's going to cost a lot of money, but B, it's not
Yeah.
full service. It's more of just I hired counsel just to kind of protect myself just in case something happens, rather than more of a provocative, no, proactive measure. I do think Substack actually does offer counsel for things that are published on their site to some writers.
Hmm.
I believe I've heard of that. I haven't personally been offered that, but I also haven't asked. So I don't know. I mean, I do think that's one of the pitfalls in doing this kind of on your own is that you don't have the team behind you to protect you if shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at like $1,200 an hour per question, like per individual, yeah, it gets expensive. Um, there's a lot of chatter and a lot of movement recently of like journalists from traditional media to new media and kind of taking on like a persona or influencer role, kind of as part of that,
Yeah.
including the folks who are joining Substacks. Like, do you think that they lose credibility in that, or do they gain a new reach? Like, I'm thinking of like everyone from like the Don Lemons to the Terry
Yeah.
Morans to, everyone in between, folks leaving CNN, folks leaving sort of like old legacy outlets and trying to do it on their own. Like, what do you think changes in that process?
I think it depends on how it's done, right? Like I think you have Chuck Todd, for example, which is a bad example of someone who leaves traditional media and goes into this like he's on this platform called Newsphere and he's like interviewing Steve Bannon and in a lot of ways he's kind of lost relevancy in doing that. But then again, on the other end, you have folks like Terry Moran and Jim Acosta who came over on Substack and are really thriving on the platform and have gained a new audience in doing so. So I think it's how you do it, not necessarily whether or not you do it. But I mean, I think it just shows that not every person who traditionally appears on television is good in an independent role, right? Like, I don't know if Caitlin Collins tomorrow said, I'm quitting CNN and going to Substack, whether she would perform as well as Jim Acosta has, for example. Or if Jake, I know she will probably perform better than someone like Jake Tapper because he doesn't have as many fans right now. But I think it just depends on the person rather than the move itself.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I even think as something so small as like, this is going to sound ridiculous, of like what people wear on television when they're reporting, like a suit and a tie, and it feels really formal, which I think lends like a certain credence and credibility to the words. Whereas if you showed up to even like this podcast interview wearing a suit and tie, it would look kind of ridiculous, right? Like people would say, like, who does this guy think he is? Like, he's trying to play, CNN anchor or whatever. And I think, yeah, a lot of that stuff like seems obvious, but maybe you have to like learn it by doing and kind of, um, yeah, learn from your peers and see what young people are doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think a big part in being successful in this industry, especially being independent, is the authenticity of it. If you're authentic, you're going to perform better. And that goes back to the give people an insight into your life, give them the behind the scenes in a safe way. Like, be more authentic and show parts of your life and parts of you that a traditional journalist wouldn't.
What, like going back to that point of like showing who you are and your authentic self online, like if you were going to run the social media for politicians or even, the party, like what would you tell them to do beyond just like, the get ready with me or take my makeup off, like AOC? But like, what are some of the things that like you would love to see politicians experiment with online?
So I think the first big thing is I think not every politician has to experiment online. So like
Mm-hmm.
I'll just like kind of push back on the basic premise of the question in that not every politician has to be dropping F bombs just because they're on social media. They don't have to be on TikTok just because everyone else is on TikTok. Not every politician is meant to be to be a digital native, right? Like putting Dick Durbin, love Dick Durbin, putting Dick Durbin and making him do a direct to camera man on the street content just doesn't work and will never work.
Yeah.
So you can't have that. But to the ones that want to and would be good on it, the best advice that I would give is to. It's funny. It's what I do when I started. I take a pencil and I put it in my mouth and I talk to the mirror with the pencil in my mouth. It makes me slow down. It makes me enunciate. It makes me just be a better public speaker. It's
Hmm.
actually a tool I used practicing opening statements when I was a lawyer. And I think every politician should do that if they're getting in front of a camera. And the content that they're putting out has to be natural to them. And it has to be easy to understand to the average person. They're not talking to 400 members of the House. They're talking to 10 million members of the American public who don't know what multisyllabic words mean all the time, right? Like, dumb it down, keep it simple. You're talking to an average person and talk to them as though they know nothing about what you are talking to them about, right?
Hmm.
Like, start using acronyms. Don't even use the acronym GOP. Just say the Republican Party. Like, break it down as simple as possible, and that's how you break through.
I agree with you. I think the Democrats are especially guilty of the sort of like talking like an Ivy League scholar, overly sort of like, in my glass castle kind of language.
Right?
And it's clearly not working, right? Like they want to sound smart. I understand why they want to sound smart, and they are smart, most of them. But as you said, kind of the acronyms and the mumbo jumbo and the wonky stuff and the inside baseball, people just can't get there yet. They need the basics, right? Like you need to start with fundamentals and then maybe you can like grow into the fancy stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that's like start simple, start smart, and then kind of. I mean, here's the thing: no one, and I think it showed love Rosa DeLauro, but she didn't need to go and do Gen Z speak on the Capitol. She just didn't need to do that. It just didn't fit well for her.
Yeah.
Not every member needs to do things like that. Like you don't have to lean into trends that don't fit. If you're not a Swiftie, please don't talk about Taylor Swift. Like just do things that are natural.
Yeah. It's hard to know. Like I totally agree with you, but sometimes it's even hard to know from the outside, like if it's authentic or not, or they're just really awkward, right? Like even though
Yeah.
they have a lot of experience getting in front of cameras and being interviewed and talking in big groups, is sometimes they're just like awkward on the stuff that they haven't been accustomed to talking about for a long time, right? Like it's easier to talk about a bill. It's easier to talk about, you know, what happens on the Senate floor, but it's harder to say like, okay, like it's my family, or here's some personal things I care about, or like who I am, who I was as a kid or whatever. So yeah, I think you can see through it, but sometimes you can't always see through it. You can't always know like if it's real or not.
Oh yeah, I mean, I listen. I agree with you 100%. I will say this though, like those who are awkward, like lean into the awkwardness, right?
Yeah.
Like be comfortable in your awkward. Like say, you know what, like I would love it if if a 60-year-old politician got in front of a camera and was like, "Hey, listen, I'm a boomer. I don't know how this works, but like, I just want to get my message out there." I guarantee that person will go viral. Like 100%.
Yeah, but like Bernie Sanders would never do that, right? Like he's very much like he plays the game and like, yeah, go ahead.
But he's not awkward. He knows how to do
No.
like
Yeah,
like
he's
Bernie,
not awkward. No.
right? It's different. Like you put a senior Republican who has never done TikTok before in front of a TikTok and be like, "Yeah, you know what? Listen, like I'm an old guy. I even voted to ban this app, but I want to reach more people. Like just be honest and be a little awkward, and you'll do well."
Yeah. Zooming out a little bit to sort of news and media broadly, are there any news or media outlets besides your own that you really like or you respect and you think that they're doing things well?
Two. The first is The Atlantic. Love The Atlantic. I think The Atlantic does really great work and actually just published a really cool piece, not cool, but good piece today about how the Trump administration ordered USAID or the State Department to incinerate about 500 tons of food that was meant for children in Afghanistan and Pakistan
Wow.
instead of actually delivering it. So like they do really good work, I think. And the second is ProPublica, which I really adore. I think that their investigative work is just as good as can be. And lately, I've kind of really come to like Wired. They've had some
Mm,
really good pieces over the past few months, especially when it came to Doge and all the things that are happening with Musk and stuff. They put out some interesting like investigative pieces. So they're kind of rising on my list.
very cool. Would you ever syndicate, or have you maybe already, like syndicate any of your Substack content to other news outlets? And have you been approached to do that?
Haven't been approached, but I would depending on the outlet. I wouldn't necessarily do it with like a mainstream outlet, but I would love to do it with like the ProPublicas of the world, some of the more independent outlets for sure.
Yeah, super cool. Um, Really interesting. One thing I think a lot about, going back to sort of like the state of the world, and, I think people are having a hard time looking at the headlines and what's going on. And people want to feel hopeful. They want to feel optimistic. They want to feel like the future is bright. Like, what would you tell those people as it relates to politics and government broadly? Like, what do people have right now to be hopeful and optimistic about?
I think the number one thing is that government is a pendulum. It really does swing. And I think we really overcorrect to the right in 2024. I think we're going to see a correction again closer to the center in 26. And then we may even have that overcorrection in 28. And we could theoretically elect someone as progressive as AOC as president. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So I think that that's number one is that government is kind of an ebb and flow thing. It comes and goes. You have these swings to the right, you have the swings to the left. Sometimes you're in the center. And at the end of the day, it's okay because government is meant to move slow. I think there's a lot of frustration with Congress, and the frustration is justifiable. But when you look back to how the framers created Congress, it wasn't meant to be this body that pumps out hundreds of pieces of legislation a year. It was meant to be a deliberative body that often is marred in gridlock. And that's what we're seeing even now with Republicans in control of both. They really don't get that much done. They got their budget bill passed, but other than that, you're not really seeing much come out of the House or the Senate right now. So that's number one. And then I think number two is that we're seeing major trends shift in local and state special elections. Every single special election since November of 2024, Democrats have overperformed in. Every single one. On the state level, on the local level, even in congressional races in Florida, they may not win, but they're overperforming sometimes by 30, 40 points in red districts. So there is a significant trend that we're seeing right now, I think, to kind of shift the country back closer to the center.
Hmm. I want to talk while we still have a few more minutes. I want to talk about the story that you shared today. Because I remember when you put out your Substack yesterday, you're like, I'm breaking a huge story, like massive exclusively reported story. I was like, oh my God, what is it? Is it the Epstein files? Like, is it the Trump coin? Is it like some other thing that's gotten a lot of attention? And the story surprised me. So if you can share a little bit about what the story is and how you came to it and why you feel it's really important for people to know about it.
Yeah, so the story is about a guy named Ryan Powers. He's graduated Harvard Law School in 2023, went to Davis Polk and Wardwell, which is one of the top firms in the country, law firms. It's actually one of the law firms that capitulated to the Trump administration and entered into one of the deals earlier this year. He, since joining Davis Polk, had been doing a lot of pro bono work, was publishing some articles, published an article earlier this year on Palantir, and just they were more nonpartisan articles. This wasn't anti-Trump in any way, but his firm's kind of leadership and administration started cracking down on what he was able to write, pulled him into a meeting, and kind of said, "Listen, like firm guidelines don't allow you to necessarily do all these things. Like you have to kind of be careful, kind of giving him an implicit threat into what he's writing." Then a day later, he sent them another article he wanted to write, this time more specifically on the future of democracy, also not an anti-Trump piece. And hours after they received that article draft, he was escorted out of the offices by guards and was fired. I thought this was important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it just shows the degradation of the law firms that are meant to protect Americans, that they're now firing employees who dare to speak out, who are not even speaking out against in a political way, but just speaking out to protect the democracy. And I think that's a really important story that is often lost in this day and age right now. People aren't talking about it enough. The second thing is not many people, very few people know this actually, and I don't think I've actually ever spoken about this publicly, and I haven't mentioned this on my Substack. So you're getting a bit of an exclusive. Personally, to me, this story is important because back in 2020, when I spoke out against Trump, I lost my law firm offer from a big firm back then.
Hmm.
And I know exactly what Ryan is experiencing now, um, just 5 years later. So I've actually never told anyone that. But so that's why that story meant so much to me. And given the fact that I was able to have that first interview with him and break it as an exclusive, that really meant a lot.
It's really interesting. I obviously don't come from the law firm world. I come from like tech, business, corporate world. But I think a lot about it's not the same, but I think it's analogous. Is like, do you remember the era where people even had to put in their Twitter bios like, "My opinions don't reflect my employers"? Remember that
Yeah,
era?
I
And
do.
just like this notion of separation of church and state, where like yes, you are an employee of a company, but like you don't necessarily represent them. They don't represent you. Like you could leave at any time, they could fire you at any time. But like I do wonder what the line is. And I don't know what the answer is. Like, what is the line of like me as an employee of some Fortune 500 company with a Twitter or a Substack account? Like, what should I be able to say? And like, should I have to go to an employee handbook and ask HR or ask my boss, like, hey, can I publish this thing? I don't know what the answer is across politics. It could be politics, gender, religion, and you can name any third rail. But I do think a lot about that because it's not a new problem. I think it's exacerbated in like a social media, internet, shareable, clickable world. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think that it's a tough balance. I think employers have, and I mentioned this in the interview with Ryan today, is that Davis Polk had every right to fire him. They didn't have to keep him employed there. They can fire him. It's an at will employee employer relationship. They don't like your politics. If they don't like political activity is not a protected class in America, so you could legally be fired. So, and he
Mm-hmm.
said this too. That's not the plan. But at the same time, I think that if an employer is truly committed to allowing their employees to have their own viewpoints on things, and that employee expresses those viewpoints in their personal capacities, then that employer should not then be able to go back and say, you know what, screw you, you're done, we're firing you.
Yep.
Because then it just contributes to the divide that we see in America. If you're going to have now what, red employers and blue employers, no, we
Hmm.
shouldn't have that. We should just have companies, and their employees should be able to say whatever they want whenever they want, so long as it doesn't impact the business itself. Like, I get it if Ryan was out there saying this Davis Polk client is unacceptable and I can't believe my firm is representing them, fine, fire him, move on. Like, I get it. It's impacting your bottom line. It's impacting the company. But he wasn't saying that. So it's a little different.
Yeah, for sure. I think where it gets really fuzzy is when like the company or the employer doesn't take a stance and doesn't communicate it to employees. Not take a stance on who they support for president, but like what are their like values and ethos as a company and what do they expect from their employees? When it's like too nebulous and then it's up to the employee to decide, can I do this thing? Is it like fair game? That's where it gets like really shaky. And it's like not a good use of time really for like anyone to like go back and forth. Can I do this? Can I not? Like you want to get work done. You want to like build a business or a company or a law firm, whatever. But I think it's hard having been on the other side of the table, worked for leadership teams, worked for CEOs. It's really hard to be prescriptive at the top and tell people exactly what you can and cannot do because the list is always growing and changing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I also think it's interesting though that we've seen like trends in employers, like during Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, during that time in 2020. All of these law firms and companies were putting out statements about how they support Black Lives Matter, how they fully stand with DEI initiatives. And I guarantee you, if Ryan was employed at Davis Polk and Davis Polk issued one of those statements and he wrote an article about how he supports DEI initiatives, he'd be gainfully employed afterwards. 4 years later, those same law firms and those same companies are gutting DEI, saying, you know what, like, screw Black Lives Matter, literally. So it's like
Yeah.
the employer can do whatever they want, the employer can say whatever they want, and apparently the employee can't.
Yeah. I definitely think the pendulum, talking about pendulums, like it swung back to employers. Like the
Yeah,
employees had a lot of leverage during the pandemic and the great resignation when, talent was like scarce and people wanted smart folks and, you could go get a better offer elsewhere. But now the companies have all the power, which,
correct.
yeah, good and bad. Really interesting. I want to be mindful of your time because I know you have a lot going on. Last sort of final question is like, what does the future look like for you and your platform? Like, what other things do you want to do, expand,
Yeah.
grow, experiment with?
If I had an answer for you, I'd give you one. I don't know, and I actually love that because for the first time, my life isn't planned out. Growing up, I would always plan out my life. In 5 years, I want to do this. In 10 years, I want to do this. 30 years, I want to run for president. But every time I do that, it never works out. Like, life takes you on such twists and turns. So right now, I'm just kind of living in the present and just taking whatever opportunities come my way, and just trying to educate as many people as possible about the news in the most accurate way. So where that takes me in the future, who knows? But right now, I'm just kind of enjoying the ride as I'm on it.
Amazing. That's the best attitude. Where can people find you, subscribe, and support you?
Yeah, my Substack, the Parnas Perspective. So go check it out. Just aaronparnas.substack.com, or my TikTok, Aaron Parnas, with number one. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.